So welcome back to another edition of the Heart to Heart podcast. And my guest today is a returning guest, Simon Goddek. Simon, welcome back to the show, brother.
Hey, what's up?
So if you guys are not familiar with Simon, he was on Twitter pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, you could kind of say, and then got kicked off, and now he's back on. And, I kind of wanted to chat with him a lot about that kind of peculiar situation that went on, because it was a little bit strange to kind of see you go and then just come back. So like, what happened there?
Yeah, that was also quite strange to me. I never thought I would be coming back. So I think I got kicked off Twitter in June 2021. So I've been just using Twitter for half a year. I think again 45,000 followers, which is all right. I mean, it wasn't the beginning when people were not awake,
Yeah.
So yeah, I was talking a lot about vitamin D. I was asking many questions as a scientist. So I got booted off for several times just for a week temporarily. And the last tweet, I think, that did it, I don't know for sure because I still didn't get my Twitter files yet. But I was asking why Bill Gates invested in biotech in September 2019 to develop a vaccine. So I was asking this question. I was even linking to the website of the Gates Foundation, where it stated that they invested the money into biotech. And then I got booted off the next day. So that was it.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I went to court. So I moved to Brazil because I lost my job in the Netherlands for speaking out. My bank accounts got frozen now and then. So I was going to Brazil because my girlfriend lives here. And I was taking them to court here. Because back then Bolsonaro said, "Hey, everybody should be able to use social media, and you can't kick people off." But I got a quite woke judge, obviously, and he said, "Oh, it's digital house rights for Twitter. They can decide who's using the platform and who doesn't." And they also provided with the reason why I was kicked off. It was a totally different one. I was saying that, I mean, it's scientific consensus back then. I mean, people think viruses don't exist, or other people say they exist, but I just assume they exist. And I said that viruses usually get weaker over time. So one doesn't have to worry about an Omicron or what else comes, because they were like making this Omicron pandemic back then. I was like, just calm down. And they considered this medical misinformation and booted me off. So this was what the lawyer said, but I think it wasn't the case because I got booted off right after I asked the question about the Gates Foundation. So this was 2022, March 2022. The judge said, "No, you're not going to get back." So in the meantime, I had my Telegram channel. It got huge as well, 75,000 at least. I was publishing my stuff there. I was publishing on Getter. I had my Substack channel. So I was busy on other platforms. And Twitter for me was like gone. It was like non-existent, because I never thought Elon would buy, and I never thought he would like resurrect me. But I got back.
That's crazy. I didn't know that all those things happened to you. Like, I knew about the Twitter ban, obviously, and unfortunately, I missed seeing your tweets coming up, but I didn't know about your bank accounts being frozen and stuff like that. Like, that's kind of crazy.
That's a bit crazy. And it was a PayPal, so they froze it, and they still didn't figure out. I mean, I'm still writing with their support, and they say like, "Oh, it's a technical issue," but like after 2 years, and they still didn't figure out. I mean, they can tell me whatever they want. It's just not working anymore, and I don't have access to anything. And my Dutch bank was just saying like, "Oh, we can't have you as a client anymore. Full stop." So at least I got that money back. I mean, at least. But yeah, all of this happened, and much more. For example, when I was flying back in the times that never were checking me or checking my passport twice or three times, and now whenever I fly, I'm not treated like a terrorist, but I'm controlled like a terrorist. Like my passport 3, 4, 5 times, and they call my name at boarding and they double check some certificates I had. So PCR test stuff, you know, the double, triple check. They even called the doctors. So super crazy stuff that was going on, and I knew what's happening. I mean, it's obvious because I've been flying so much in my life, and since I spoke out, they like control me everywhere. Police ring my doorbell. The Dutch government was calling me every second day.
Ringing your doorbell. What's that all
Oh,
about?
well, okay, it's a bit of my fault. So when I got back from Brazil, and they said like you have to quarantine. And so the people called me, you know, are you at home? You can't leave the flat. And I'm just telling them like, fuck yourself, you know, don't do this. And then I had the police, of course, in front of my door, and these people calling again and all this stuff. But it's like quite easy. The police was there checking with them home. As soon as they left, I could leave as well because they wouldn't come back within a minute. So, but still, there was lots of stuff going on. Of course, losing the job in the most ridiculous way.
And Simon, tell me a little bit about that too. Like, what job did you have, and why did they give you any specific reason as to why you lost it?
Orally. And I have nothing written, otherwise I would have been to court already. So I had in the Netherlands at the Wageningen University, I had a limited contract. I think it's a 3 years postdoc contract. And they told me, yeah, okay, if you can find follow-up funding, of course, you can stay longer with us. I mean, like, yeah. So I was writing in my free time. So at night, whenever I got home from work, I was writing on a follow-up call for 3 months. And the chance to get funded in the EU is like maybe 1% that you get the money, all right? So I was doing it in my free time. I was adding a whole consortium. It was Wageningen University and I think 6 other partners. And so I eventually won. I was like, yeah, I'm going to stay with you. They were like, well, I was like, what well? I wrote this stuff. And they was like, yeah, but like there are people unhappy with me. I'm like, what do you mean unhappy with me? They were like, yeah, what you're saying on Twitter. I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, that you accused Drosten and Koopmans for committing fraud. I'm like, it's fraud. You can just look it up. I mean, like they agreed with me that it was fraud. So I had talks with them. And they're like, oh, you're right. It's good what you said. But obviously they had some pressure from above. I don't know, maybe the ministry or whatever. And they were just saying like, sorry, we can't take you. We take the money you actually got for us and we will get another person. Yeah. So they booted me off with the money I generated, which is unethical.
Pretty unethical. Yeah.
It's super unethical. And they didn't do the written form. It was just like a phone call. And they have the right to do so. Let's put it like this, but it has never been done before. So the person who gets the money has more or less, I mean, I brought the money. They took it and kicked me off. This never happens. But eventually I'm working now for another partner, which I put on this application. Yes. Which is good. I mean, like I still have a job, but it was like not sure that I would get this job. And that was, of course, heavy for me because I was like using my free time and I got them several millions of euros and they would just be like, fuck yourself, find yourself another job. I mean, it's a bad feeling to be canceled job-wise, to be canceled life-wise, and to be canceled, of course, on social media as well, which was like, by far not the worst. I mean, I'm fine with being canceled on social media. I mean, not totally fine, but as soon as it enters the private life, you know, it sucks.
It's a feeling of being like used, you know. It's like you did all the work and then you don't get any of the credit. Not only do you not get any of the credit, but it's like, hey, see you later. You can't work here anymore. I mean, that's basically, you know, the biggest fuck you can ever give to someone, more or less.
Biggest, and it was people from Twitter who were sending all the emails to my former employer. So
people from Twitter. So like
yes.
I'm sure you must have seen the video, or maybe you didn't, of the I forget her name. Her last name is Goddek, the girl on Twitter.
Oh, Miss Goddek.
And then she got lit up pretty bad by someone. I forget the lady's name, but I posted it on my Instagram yesterday. You know, she said like, "Are you a medical doctor?" Like,
It was
no.
yesterday, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it was yesterday. And you know, this lady Goddek, anyways, I forget her first name, and I'm sure I'm saying her last name right, but she has no medical training, like nothing at all. And basically, she was, you know, dictating whether or not, you know, certain physicians should be able to post on Twitter. And again, these were like highly credentialed physicians. And leave even that part out of it. Like, you should be able to say, you know, whatever you want anyway. You know, I don't think censorship is a good tool almost in like in any sense for the most part, you know, very limited anyway. But you know, it's kind of crazy that this, you know, lady came on and basically was just, you know, she disparaged all these medical professionals like Martin Koldroff, Jay Bhattacharya, like very well credentialed physicians, and somehow she thought that she had the authority at Twitter to remove these people, you know, from Twitter and to not allow them to post. And again, you know, yourself, like you also were a victim of this, you know, you got your, you know, Twitter account banned. And so did you find out if it was one person specifically that was like targeting you, or was it just Twitter as a whole, or was it some sort of like algorithm, or like, you know, was there any kind of indication as to, you know, what it was? Like, I know you said that it was that last tweet about the Bill Gates thing, but you know, when you investigated, did they give you any concrete answers at all?
No, I know who's behind it. So there have been people who've been telling their followers to report me, and it's mainly Jamie or Jamie, whatever you call him. I don't know. This professor, and Peter Hotez
Okay.
was also calling people. So they called me anti-Semite because I called Hotez evil. I didn't even know he was a Jew. So he said like being evil is associated with the Jews, so you're anti-Semite. So I was like, whatever they say. I don't take these people seriously. But yeah, so they've been calling their followers to put me off, and you can tell. I mean, like by German law. I mean, you've seen it probably. Every time a German reports you, you get an email, and which tells you by German law we have to tell you that a German has reported you. so so I got many of these emails. I think I got like 20, 30, 40 every day during a half a year. And this was just the Germans, but they also woke American people, woke Canadians. Canadians are probably the wokest.
Yeah, we're
You
pretty bad
know,
over here
yeah,
with Justin Trudeau, and
yeah.
yeah, there's some others that we have here too. I won't get into it, but we have this group Science Up First, and they're a bunch of like, they're not highly credentialed people, and you know, they give out a lot of misinformation, and they claim to be the ones battling misinformation, and a lot of them don't even have any medical training whatsoever at all. Like, it's a joke. So
Blackface Castro isn't on Twitter, but there's like people like Alistair McAlpine,
yeah,
yuck,
I know who he is.
and
Yeah,
David Fissman, and
yeah,
they've been very aggressive towards everybody who dared to raise their opinion or their voice. And I've been, yeah, I mean, like I've been booted off like 6 times, and the seventh strike was like forever. But yeah, it's the fun part is like as soon as I got back, I think I got back with a whole group of friends, which I made. We had like a common Telegram channel, like all big accounts. We got back, I think, on Christmas, and
nice
I
Christmas gift.
think yeah, I got back and I lost 10,000 followers. Most likely people who also got banned or didn't want to be on Twitter anymore, or bots. I don't know. At least I got back with 35,000, which was like, I don't know, 6 weeks ago. And now I'm almost at 200,000, which is
That's insane.
it's
That's
it's like
insane.
all of these people who got back, they were like, oh my gosh, they've been banned. These guys must be cool. They must be telling them some truth, or like something that's just like close to the truth. So I think this got what got many followers, because people were like, okay, he got booted off, he's back, he must be a cool dude. Um, And it didn't just happen to me, but everybody else got booted off, and they also gained many followers. And yeah, now it feels much better. It feels like I can tell what I think. Of course, I'm still self-censoring myself. I mean, this is what happens if you were censored during a course of half a year. I mean, you self-censor yourself automatically without wanting to do it, but I still somehow do it. I mean, like I don't raise my opinion regarding LGBT. Okay, LBT. I think it's LBT or LGT. Oh, never mind. LGB. I have nothing against it. Super fine. But I have issues with all the other letters which follow, and I'm trying to not state my opinion about all this crazy pedophile trans stuff that they're currently pushing, or gender fluid. I mean, there are so many weird words.
It's a super odd thing, and like I've commented on this recently quite a bit too. And actually, Jordan Peterson, one of the stronger Canadian voices, actually, ironically, I think he retweeted you and I on the very same day recently, when a vitamin D study came out. But yeah, it's crazy that that's happened to you. But my other question to you about that is that, so you've had a lot happen to you. You've been booted off Twitter, you lost your job, you're now living in Brazil. I mean, I don't really feel too bad for you living with a Brazilian girlfriend, but like, we can skip that part. But have a lot of other scientists also had a lot of backlash against them as well, like some colleagues and friends that
Yeah. So I'm aware of many scientists who lost their jobs. I'm not going to tell names because I think most of them don't want to talk about this even, because they're afraid they will never get a job again. But basically, if your name is once slandered, I mean, it's very hard to get funding. At least in Europe, it's like this. If you want to have funding, you have to apply for it at the European Union. And if you have a bad name, a dirty name, you will not get it anymore. So that's problems. That's a problem I think we'll be facing, even though, I mean, the tables are turning. And I hear from more and more people who used to be very critical towards what I said in the past, like, well, Simon, you've been right. And if this continues going like that, and even the governments will say like, okay, maybe you guys have been right, there might be a chance. But I don't believe in it, because the climate is around the corner. There's new stuff to talk about, which they will not like again. So I think it will be an endless fight, and like showing real data or showing non-manipulated data to really follow scientific approaches, which means having a control group, having experiments which you can repeat, and not just relying on exponential models, which people like Ferguson make.
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of problems with the overall narrative, but just coming back to one thing that we both definitely agree upon, and I think it's worth mentioning, even though I mentioned it in my last podcast, is with regards to the vitamin D. I know you saw that study that came out, the meta-analysis plus the trial sequential analysis, and they said indisputable evidence now that low vitamin D is linked to worse COVID outcomes. Again, I don't want to put any numbers or anything like that on it, but for sure it does appear that if you are low in vitamin D, you will likely have a worse time with COVID overall. And I don't understand why that message has not been brought forward. And I don't understand why that message hasn't been brought forward after that particular study that came out, or why it wasn't, mainstream news. We're still not hearing anything about vitamin D related to COVID. And I know that that's one of the big things that you've been advocating for from the start. Myself, I've been advocating for it as well. And for some reason, people are still pushing back against that. And like, my whole thing with that again is that even if we're wrong, which we're not, like, there's so much evidence now out there that indicates that we are on the right side of that. You need vitamin D anyway. Like I was taking vitamin D before COVID because low vitamin D is linked to depression. Low vitamin D is linked to low testosterone. Low vitamin D is linked to osteoporosis. You know, the Kevin Bass who's on the other day was talking about how, you know, low vitamin D is bad when you have, you know, an aggressive cancer. It can, you know, potentially metastasize much greater or faster. So, you know, it's kind of silly that they won't promote this thing or talk about, you know, this one vitamin that we should be using anyway. And I think that's, you know, a big reason why, you know, you may have gotten in trouble. And it just sounds so crazy to think that, you know, all we're doing is talking about a vitamin, and somehow that's being controversial and is part of the reason why some people are getting banned from Twitter or even losing their job.
So yeah, it's I mean, it's even a hormone. And yeah, you're right. I mean, like the first time I was being kicked off Twitter, I think it was for 1 week. It was because I posted my own vitamin D publication on Twitter. So peer reviewed, and they just said like medical misinformation, and they put me off for a week. This is when I was starting to think what's going on. And also then my back then employer, they got many emails regarding, look at this publication, Simon is actually selling vitamin D products, which I didn't do until today. I mean, today I started, but I never back then sold one vitamin D pill, and they said like a conflict of interest, etc. So they tried to get me in every way. They tried to silence me. The journal got many restriction requests, and I had to like show all the proof that I didn't do anything wrong. You know, they were told, oh, he has a company which sells vitamin D. I never had. So they were like, please prove that you don't have a company. I was like, oh yeah, well, how should I prove that I don't have one? I don't have one. Please prove I have one. Can you show me anywhere my name? And no, they couldn't. And then my university had to write them a official letter and saying, look, Simon only works here. He doesn't have a vitamin D factory. And they tried this. I know who's behind it. It's like the skeptics movement from the Netherlands, like really nasty people. One of them is a bird watcher. I mean, he has like 2 followers. He's a bird watcher, and all over the internet, he's like slandering my name. And there's nothing else to do. I mean, like he's retired. So seriously, probably has nothing else to do, but super nasty people, these skeptics. I've never seen something like this in my life. I mean, it's Gestapo. It's an modern Gestapo on the internet. So they have been behind that. And but I kept on talking about vitamin D, and I kept on posting studies, and people got mad. They got really offended even. They said like, oh, look, it's medical misinformation. You might kill people. But as you said, it doesn't. And even the review study you just mentioned, even that one, I think it really proves that vitamin D is super important against everything, COVID, cancer, osteoporosis, whatever you call it. And even that one is a bit biased because they also took studies which sufficiency studies that consider 30 nanograms per milliliter sufficient, you know. And for me, in my opinion, everything below 50, 60 is not sufficient. So if you then look at the high numbers, people don't get sick at all. So there are studies which you could look up, or at least there's data and studies that you can look up. People who had a higher vitamin D blood serum level, higher than 60, they never got sick. And this, as we mentioned, it's like the information is out there. There's this Coimbra protocol regarding cancer and other diseases. There's hundreds and thousands of papers about vitamin D that actually show why it's like that. They even show the metabolic pathway, what's happening in your body, what's happening if you take vitamin D high. You have to take it like with K2, magnesium, eventually zinc, and all of this is known. And suddenly they say, well, in case of COVID, it doesn't apply anymore. And I think this is a crime. It's even more a crime if you want to silence people who actually just repeat old knowledge from 80 years ago or 100 years ago even. So I'm just repeating knowledge, and they now consider it a crime. And then you have to wonder yourself, you have to ask yourself, why is it happening?
Yeah, that's crazy. And I don't mean to take away from your censorship, but I was booted off of LinkedIn, and it's insane why I was booted off. So I literally took a screenshot of a study and this is ironic too, that the caption that I used, I said data greater than feelings. So I stole that from Lane Norton, BioLane T, who goes by, he's a great nutritionist online, so shout out to him. But I stole that from him, and ironically, that's what got me booted off. All I did was post a peer-reviewed study, a caption of it or a screenshot of it, and then my entire caption was just those three things: data, a greater than equal sign to feelings. And obviously what happened was that I upset someone's feelings, and they thought that their feelings were more important than the data. They didn't like the data, they had upset their feelings, and then they decided to kick me off of LinkedIn. And that's why I'm not on LinkedIn right now, is because somebody got upset that I put out a study that they didn't like. That's it. That's the only reason why I'm not on LinkedIn right now, which is crazy. And it sucks too, because that was one of my fastest growing networks for sure. So it's again, like, it's happening to you, it's happening to me. You can only imagine, how many scientists around the world this is happening to. Like, I've had Arian Cariati on here. He's, been booted off of not Twitter, but he's lost his job and that kind of thing. There's been a lot of physicians, a lot of scientists that have, lost their livelihood just because they're actually just promoting good science, or even just like replicating, or just saying what the findings were in a particular study, which is completely insane. And now that's why we're in this position where people are getting so sick so easily, is because we don't have good information that's being put out to the public, because so many good scientists are being censored.
Exactly. And especially there, Martin, Jay, they've been slandered too. So if you look at, for example, Christian Drosten, like the biggest shill from Europe, he's been saying, oh, these are pseudoscientists. They do cherry picking. They don't know what they're talking about. They're not accepted in our community. It started like that. And if you keep on telling bad stuff about a physician or about a scientist, people remember this, They say like, oh, wasn't it the guy who did something wrong or whatever? So this is what they're doing. And in my opinion, it's the media who supported it. So I'm always tweeting against the media, because without the media, if the media did their job, we wouldn't be in this situation. So there are people, especially virologists, who I think are super creepy, but also other opportunists who are out there, and the media is pushing them, and they never let our voices hear. So we have to talk on Telegram, and then they say, oh, all the Nazis are on Telegram, and then you're suddenly a Nazi, for just showing data. And this is the situation we're in. And I think now it's changing a bit, but we shouldn't forget. So we shouldn't forget at all. So that's why every day I'm shooting out 2 tweets, like reminding people of what others have been doing. For example, that others said like, oh, they want unvaccinated people to die, or they would never sit next to an unvaccinated person, And these are like big accounts who've been saying that. It's not like just like a random person, random accounts. These are big accounts making statements which are totally fascist. And I'm calling them out because we shouldn't forget. Many of them are like now trying to get out of it and saying like, oh, maybe we've been a little bit wrong, but haven't we all been wrong? But we've all been wrong. No, we haven't. We've been right, and they've been super wrong, and they've been unethical, and we shouldn't forget. Whether people want to forgive, they have to know about themselves. I will not forgive. I will forgive some people. People have manipulated, but I will not forgive people who manipulated. And that's a big difference.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. That's a really good point. Anyone who's been, manipulated, I can totally, forgive them. But when you knew that you were doing something wrong and you did it anyway, that's pretty hard to forgive, and that's something that I think a lot of people are going to have a lot of issues with. And especially now, I just thought about this last night. Just this year, we've seen, we had that trial with, the lady from Twitter getting absolutely grilled. We had that study that Dr. Fauci was the author of. I actually posted that study, I think yesterday as well, where he's the author of a study where he indicated, right in the summary of the abstract, that we can't control COVID with experimental vaccines. I mean, that's directly in the study. You can go on my Instagram page and look it up and see the study yourself and see that Dr. Anthony Fauci is an author on that paper. And then we also have the vitamin D study that came out. I think there was something other like significant that happened.
Study, the big
yeah.
mask study.
And then the mass study. Yeah. So I was just thinking, I was like, man, those are 4 like in massive things that happened, and we're not even in the middle of February yet. So I can only imagine what's going to come out more throughout the year. And then if you look back to, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious now when you look at the data with regards to myocarditis for boys below the age of 30 years old, that like there's definitely a risk there, and the risk from the vaccine does seem to be greater than the risk from COVID. And I acknowledged at the beginning that COVID can the COVID infection itself, not the vaccine, can actually cause myocarditis. I totally acknowledge that, but I also acknowledge the fact that the vaccine itself can also cause myocarditis. And again, for certain age groups, maybe not for everyone, but certainly for boys under the age or men under the age of 30, there does seem to be a pretty big risk. And I think that, the decision to vaccinate someone in that age group should certainly be, weighed against the risks. And I think even just, mentioning that or saying that, weighing the risks and benefit of the vaccine somehow is controversial, which is completely insane. And it just, shuts down dialogue between physicians, and that's not good for anyone.
No, even the flu can cause myocarditis. We shouldn't forget about that. Any disease you suffer from can cause it. And I think the likelihood of getting myocarditis after the flu is the same as after COVID. And to me, COVID is just the flu, like relabeled. So in my opinion, there's no proof that COVID is something different. It has the same symptoms. And
what about
the virus,
with the Delta variant though? Did you think that was maybe a little bit worse than the flu?
Well, if you look up, I mean, like who's getting sick, who has been tested, how did they test? So it was, nothing made sense. Even the test itself didn't make sense. So back then they used a psycho threshold, which was I think much higher. And then after much lower, and of course, then you find more cases of people who are sick with the virus. I don't say of the virus. So most of the time it's with the virus. You had hospitals who got incentivized, got money for labeling dead people as COVID dead. At least was like this in the UK. It was like this in Brazil. So the WHO would give for every person who died, like from, off, with, whatever COVID, they would just give an additional bonus. And of course, the Brazilian hospitals, believe me, it's a second world country. They were like, give me the money. And I know a person who worked in the administration of the hospital, and whoever died was just a COVID death. So this was during Delta. So was it Delta killing people? Or was it maybe the administration was killing people? Was the treatment, like the aeration, that was killing people? Was it like that people didn't get the good treatment when they got in? Or was it the panic? In the beginning, people had like much more panic. Panic leads to higher cortisol level, and cortisol kills people. So what was the factor? And I think it wasn't the virus. I think it was never the virus. But that's my personal opinion. I don't have proof for it. I mean, like, also the other side doesn't have proof for it. They didn't isolate the specific viruses yet. And it's a difficult topic to talk about, but that's my personal opinion. And it's controversial, I know. But what's not controversial is that they haven't been doing what they had to do in case of an outbreak. So, which is like give people vitamin D, let people eat healthy food, promote healthy food, take away the tax from healthy food. Just like in some European countries, you pay 7 or 9% taxes on healthy food. Just take it away. Let people eat healthy food for a cheaper price than hamburgers. Don't close the sport clubs. That's what they did. The first thing they did is like, oh, you can't do sports anymore. You have to stay inside. Staying inside, low vitamin D level. Avoiding sports clubs makes you sick as well, because lack of movement is never good for your health. So they did everything so that people got sicker. And then, of course, you had this wave, you had this excess mortality. People who are afraid, who don't have healthy input, which means like healthy food or whatever treatment, and who are not allowed to go outside and do sports. I mean, that's what you get. People die. And there are great studies regarding elderly people who are alone. They die very, very fast. And you were not allowed to visit your grandma in the elderly home. So you had old people suddenly dying. You see it on the graph. And I think the causality here is totally different one as the one they're telling us.
Yeah, I think they definitely dropped the ball on the early treatment. You know, like you said, like it's not just the vitamin D. You know, I know there's less evidence for zinc, but you know there is definitely some evidence that you know low zinc can certainly contribute to poor outcomes as well. And then you know we haven't talked too much about you know obesity, but obviously that goes hand in hand with you know exercising and eating healthy. We know that people who there's a very linear correlation, you know, meaning that the higher your body mass index is, even if it's past like 23, which is not very high at all. I mean, you're still considered to be in a normal BMI then. But this one study I saw anyway that showed that even past 23, you know, BMI of 23, it's completely linear. So, you know, the bigger you are, the bigger your, the higher your BMI is, you know, the more likely you are to have a worse time with COVID. And I'm not sure why that message is not sent out. I'm not sure if it's because, you know, they're afraid of offending people. But, you know, it's better to maybe, you know, offend someone and have them live a healthy life than, you know, not offend them and then get them sick. You know, so it boggles my mind why that wasn't, you know, introduced. And then the povidone iodine mouthwashes, you know, there's a product called betadine. I'm not paid to say that or anything, but you know, I used that before and I thought it was incredibly effective. You know, when I had COVID, it cleared up my throat like right away almost. You know, I mean, it doesn't take away all the symptoms immediately, but it certainly takes away a lot of the symptoms in your throat anyway, like pretty immediately. And there's, you know, there's meta-analysis on this. I mean, I saw one it's over a year old now, so which in COVID terms is eternity because it's only been for, you know, 3 years. But you know, we did have some early treatments, I think, that you know were not utilized that would have made a big difference and that still would make a big difference. I mean, people now today, I mean, you know, they don't have, you know, that mouthwash in their in their medicine cabinet just in case. I mean, I have 2 or 3 bottles in my medicine cabinet just in case, you know, I do start to feel sick and I'm exposed and I want to you know, clear the infection as fast as possible. One of the things I'm going to do is use that mouthwash. And the other things, you know, like we kind of talked about, vitamin D, I do that anyway. Zinc, I do that anyway. Both ironically actually, you know, help with testosterone. I mean, if you're low in vitamin D or low in zinc, you are more likely to be low in testosterone. I always do everything I can to make sure my T is as high as it can be. And then eating healthy, you know, we mentioned exercising. And the other thing too is sleeping, you know, sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night. And I know we chatted about this last time on my podcast. You were talking about, you know, some product that you used that I think it had a combination of CBD and melatonin. And you said you were sleeping really, really well on that. And yeah, I mean, those things make a big difference overall. And again, it's not that, you know, some of the things I mentioned, like the betadine is specific for COVID, but the other things you should be doing anyway. You know, you should be trying to get 7 to 8 hours a night of sleep anyway, just so you can feel better the next day, you know, so you're metabolically healthy, you know, so you're optimizing your hormones. You know, if you don't sleep well, your testosterone drops, your growth hormone level drops, which means your overall motivation and well-being is going to drop. And, you know, these things, you know, were not discussed. And again, like, it's just, like, I know I keep repeating myself a lot, but it's like these things are still not discussed 3 years later, which is why I'm repeating myself. If everyone was, you know, hooked in on this now or glued in on it, I wouldn't be repeating myself. But, you know, I feel like I have to, and it's still important to repeat myself because it's still not being implemented. And so, like, what is it going to take for this to be implemented? Like I'm not really sure, like how much more evidence for vitamin D do we need before someone steps up and says, hey guys, you should probably make sure that your vitamin D is, you know, optimized or at least not deficient, because if you do let it drop too low, you are more likely to have a worse time with COVID, a worse time with flu.
It's not going to happen. I mean, Pfizer doesn't have a patent on vitamin D, and they don't have a patent on sleeping, obviously. I mean, all this common sense health advice, which you just said, like exercising, eating healthy, vitamin D, K2, magnesium, zinc, sleeping, socializing with friends, you know, and just going out in the fresh air. All this hasn't been communicated to us. There has been no single minister of health who has been saying, I do this and that. Nobody. They're all like Paxlovid, 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 Pfizer, Pfizer, Pfizer. Okay, it's Paxlovid. And take the mRNA shot. So this was their solution. And it's no solution. It's everybody who's MD or is a scientist knows that this is an end of pipe solution. So it's just like treating the symptoms. But usually what good MDs do is they look at the root causes or how to treat the root cause, or what the root causes are and what you can do about this. And this has never been told to us. And I think this is the biggest crime they committed. They should have done this way before, not just like now. They should do it in general as Minister of Health. But on the other hand, if you look at the ministers of health, they also look super unhealthy. So there is no single minister of health who knows what health is. They all look like The Walking Dead. So it's a systematic problem we are facing. And I think the only solution is that people like you, like me, like many others, that we try to educate people on social media. And you have big impact on Instagram, which I don't use, but you have also big impact on Twitter. I have big impact on Twitter and Telegram, and I keep on telling these people. And many people are messaging me like, Simon, what you've been doing like 2 years ago, I never heard about vitamin D, and we are doing great. Thank you for this. And this is something good to hear. And I'm pretty sure you hear this as well. My other colleagues hear it as well. I think this is what our job is. I mean, if the government doesn't do their job, if the journalists don't do their job, we have to take over their job.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what has to happen. I mean, I feel, you know, compelled to say the things that I say because, like you just said, I mean, I think you said it beautifully, that like the government and these public health officials, you know, they're not doing their job. And so when you see someone else not doing their job and you know better and you know that, you know, you can do something about it, you know, then you should step up and do something and say something, you know. And for me, you know, not to get too deep here, but I mean, I remember Jordan Peterson talking about, you know, sins of omission and sins of commission. And, you know, he says, if you see something and wrong and, you know, you don't say anything, that's just as bad as if you did do something wrong, you know, because the consequences could be just as severe. And, you know, taking COVID as an example, you know, if I see all this data that indicates that, you know, low vitamin D is linked to poor health outcomes, and I see no government official, you know, talking about this, then yes, I'm going to feel compelled inside to come out and start discussing this, you know. And I can't understand why, you know, other people also don't feel more compelled to come out and say this. So, you know, I'm very grateful for, you know, people like yourself, Simon, and some of the people that you've introduced me to on the chat. And I think that we need, you know, more and more of us. And as we grow in numbers, you know, we become more powerful. And then I think as we grow in numbers too, then, you know, they're going to have no choice but to, you know, listen to us. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of that now, but I really hope we gain more and more momentum very, very quickly.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, you know, when I added you to our little chat round, I think we have 30 members. All of us, we're like kind of small accounts, you know, people who start to speak up. I think you were still the biggest back then. And now you can see we have several millions of followers and maybe 100 millions of views per week or even more. So we have a very high impact already on society, and it's our task, our obligation to use it wisely, to get information out in a way that's really data, you know, and not like misinformation or sensationalist. I mean, we don't have to make it sound like, oh, everybody's dying from the vaccine, go and run. No, this is not necessary, but we should tell people what they can do about their health, like what they can do, not what the government does, but what they can do themselves, because you're responsible for yourself. Everybody's responsible for him and herself. So people should start taking their health in their own hands and do something about it. And if people are obese, it's their task to go on a treadmill. It's their task to eat healthy. It's not the government who's supposed to babysit them and make them healthy. It's their task.
I agree. I think people do need to take, personal responsibility for their health. I mean, I certainly know that's, obviously some people are going to be born in families where they've, been kind of dealt a bad hand with regards to not necessarily even genetics, but just, poor environment where they're never exposed to, good nutrition, and, people in their family are obese and that kind of thing. But that being said, there are lots of people out there who are born into those environments, and then they do lose the weight and they do somehow, figure it out. And, there's a guy, Ethan Suplee, that Hollywood actor, who's like 550 pounds. Now he's like 250 pounds. Like, he just decided one day that he, didn't want to be the big guy anymore. He didn't change his genetics. Like, he just changed his behavior, and then he lost the weight. And, that's a message that we do have to get out there. And again, I do sympathize with people with, behavior modification and controlling their weight, because it is very, very difficult to do. Like, there's, very few things I can think of that are more difficult than, trying to change your behavior and trying to, lose weight, because it's old habits that are being, ingrained in there. But the other thing too is that just saying that, it's okay to be that way doesn't make anything better. I'm not saying that it doesn't, suck, or that it's not insanely difficult if you were, born into an environment or a family where, you were only exposed to, really poor nutrition, and most of your family members are obese. But, staying with that mentality isn't going to do you any good. And just, offering those kind of people sympathy, it's not going to do anything good in the long run. Eventually you got to get to a point where, you're eating less calories than you're expending, and eventually you will figure it out. So, again, I do sympathize with those people, but, we do need more personal responsibility for health. And I know we only have a couple minutes left here, and I'm going on a little bit of a rant, but like in the US, for example, like the obesity rate right now, I think it's 42.5%.
It is, right?
Yeah. So like, that's almost 1 in 2 people. And the other thing about that too is that, like, people talk about like the healthcare system, how it's a sick care system and that kind of thing. And I understand that, but at the same time, you do go to a doctor when you're sick. It's your responsibility sort of to try to take care of yourself and prevent yourself from getting sick. And I don't think a lot of people, are doing that, unfortunately. And then that's burdening the healthcare system. So like, what's going to happen if the obesity rate is 60% or 70%? Like, no healthcare system is going to be able to maintain that. And then people will still call it a sick care system. And it's like, okay, I understand what you're saying, but at some point we got to place some of the responsibility back on the patients and back on, the citizens, because it's just not sustainable to have a population with this, exponentially growing obesity rate, and then to also have this, incredible free healthcare system for everybody. Like, it's just not sustainable in the long term.
Yeah, I've been receiving a shitstorm when I said, hey guys, you tell us that unvaccinated people should pay for their own health, should pay extra money when they want to go to the hospital. And I said, like, hey, well, what about obese people also do this, or drinkers or smokers? Exactly. Yeah. All of this. It's their responsibility to be healthy. Of course, there might be genetic cancer, etc. You shouldn't blame it on this, but usually you can tell input is output if you have a lifelong input of just trash, which is like sugars, carbs, etc., trans fats into your body cannot be healthy. It's impossible. I mean, who am I telling this? But yeah, I think we got a good conclusion here. Like,
Yeah.
care for your own health. Huh?
Well, tell us about your website before we let you go, Simon.
Oh yes, I launched today. It's sunfluencer.com. Like, not like influencer, but the good influencer stuff. You know, I don't like influencers as such. You know, these people say like, oh, look at my new lipstick. I saw you had one there as well. And but yeah, Sunfluencer, sunfluencer.com. And I was creating the last 3 years. I was working on a vitamin D product, which includes K2, which is super important, magnesium, zinc, and also ion, and selenium for your thyroid, because the thyroid also has a big impact on the immune system. And some other stuff is there, quercetin, you name it. But I was putting a product together which is good for everybody, 5,000 units per day. And yeah, because I got tired myself for slicking, for taking 10 pills per day. And this way I reduced it to 2. It's for the US only. I'm sorry, maybe even Canada, but I think it's for North America only. So the European friends need to wait a bit.
Yeah, I'll leave you on that. But just before I leave, I'll say that there was a study that came out just recently with quercetin and curcumin. Was very, very interesting in COVID. Drastic reduction in symptoms and also quicker resolution on PCR testing. So, you know,
yeah, heavy antioxidants.
Yeah, heavy antioxidants. Yeah. Okay, so guys, follow Simon on Twitter. He's Simon Goddek. And great chatting with you, brother. Always great to have you on. Love to have you back again. And for everyone listening, thank you so much for listening. And I'll be back again soon.